Shalom, welcome back to Shofar Mountain. It's a rainy morning and there's some goat rustling going on down in there, right? There. Well, I wanted to take a minute just to talk about the anniversary of D-Day. Today is the 75th anniversary of D-Day, and D-Day was an invasion of Omaha Beach, of German-held territory in France, I think it was, and the British forces and like Canadian forces, American forces had to work together to do this invasion, and it was like a push. It was like a final push to get the Germans out of France. The Allied nations were really in deep trouble. Germany had, at the beginning of the war, pushed west and taken so many countries in and around Germany, and had kind of stalled in Russia. But Stalin was like adamant that he needed help, and the Germans had pushed really far into Russia. Stalingrad was kind of where it all stalled, and then when the Russian winter came in, the Germans were used to that cold, but they were so far from their bases that it became a problem for them. And Stalin was pushing to be able to keep all the countries that Russia took from Germany as they came west and pushed them out of the Eastern European area. And so, I mean, Americans at the time really were trying to not get involved in that war. They really didn't see it as a war that Americans needed to be involved in. And when Pearl Harbor was bombed, that brought America into the war. And what I think England was counting on was how big and how new America was, and knew that he needed the American alliance to fight off the Germans, because so many of his European allies had already fallen. And so he was kind of desperate, and he made several trips to America, several talks to Roosevelt about aid, and Roosevelt actually enacted laws that ramped up our war machine, ramped up our economy, and really companies like Ford and I can't think of the name of the engines now, but our industrial complex, our industrial companies started going from, making washing machines and cars and so on, to churning out boats and planes. I think I was watching a documentary on Roosevelt, and I think it said something like, we made 100,000 planes. There was a huge 16-acre factory that Ford had that turned out a tank every 3 minutes, where normally it would take a couple of months. And so the American people really, really put out effort towards that war, and we did save Europe. We really did. Without us, Britain probably would have fallen, and then all of Western Europe would have been in the hands of the Germans. So America was really important in World War II, and we did some wonderful things, and some tough farm boys out of Iowa and Idaho and Texas and Kansas and so on went over there, and they, unlike now where a soldier only fights for 6 months to a year and then they rotate out, some of those guys were there the whole war. They were there 4 and 5 years, but by the time 4 and 5 years had passed, they had become veterans and really good at what they were doing. And so it is important. It's important to the people of Europe, especially France, this anniversary, and it's very important to England. That's why Trump's over there, and that's why the leaders in Britain, Prime Minister May and so on, are making such a big deal. Mayors of towns who were there when the Germans were occupying are thanking Americans. There was a man in one of my husband's units who flew over for, I think, the 60th or 50th, and those people greeted him like a conquering hero, even though that guy had never been there, was too young in the war. But they were the people who were there at the time under the German occupations were so grateful for the Americans getting in the war and helping the Allies win. They still remember it. And one of the things that happened on this anniversary was a 97-year-old veteran, he parachuted tandem in the same jump that he parachuted in when he was in that war. I mean, 97 years old, that's a tough guy. You got to admire that, and you got to understand the importance of our country in the world picture. It's important that our country is strong and that we continue to fight for, I'm going to sound like a commercial, but the cause of freedom, democracy, etc. In those days, you were fighting Nazi Germany. During the Vietnam War, we were fighting communism, and now we're fighting Islamic terrorism. So I think it's a really important day to remember. I think it's important to know why, and to give credit to all those veterans who gave their lives to save Europe and the world from occupation by Nazi Germany, Imperial Japan, and Italy. The Italians were in that that Axis power, and were fighting in their area and trying to take over Africa. All right, if you don't know this stuff, look it up. It's really fascinating, and there's really good movies on it. All sorts of movies. The Longest Day. This documentary on the Roosevelts was good. There's just all sorts of World War II movies out there that you guys can watch that'll help you figure out what was going on. All right, bless you. Shalom.